New World is a buy-to-play MMORPG set in the world of Eternum and is run by Amazon Game Studios. This game released on September 28th, and after an explosive start, followed by a mass exodus from the game, New World seems to still be maintaining a semblance of a healthy player base post-launch, but it is definitely going through some growing pains. As part of my MMO tour that I'm doing, hitting all the major MMOs out there, as well as new ones that are released, New World was one of my most heavily requested MMOs out of all of them. Now, prior to the game's release, I had my skepticisms about the game, seeing a ton of potential issues with the game's combat, wondering if the game would feel finished with how much Amazon pivoted on the game's focus, and how they would do as a new dev studio. But guys, as with all of my MMO first impression and review videos, we are going to be doing a small about section discussing pros, cons, and gray area points. But before we get into the review today, guys, I do just want to thank the sponsor of today's video, Epic Desk. Now, Epic Desk makes mouse pads with exclusive designs, but with the same great gaming performance that you know from your traditional mouse pad. Now, they don't make any mass-produced mouse pads. All of the designs on their mouse pads are all limited print, limited edition, and once they're sold out, they are gone. The mouse pad is 36.5 inches by 15.75 inches with a 4mm thickness. Now, this thing will cover a lot of surface area. It is a big mouse pad. Also, most mouse pads are actually 3mm thick, but this just adds a little bit of extra layer of cushion that honestly gives the mouse pad, at least for me, a higher quality feel. One of the first things that I did notice after I unpacked the mouse pad for myself were the colors. The print on this is extremely high quality. My camera from my phone is not doing it justice, and honestly, it does feel like a very cool addition to my desk over a traditional black mouse pad. It was packaged well, shipped in a timely manner, and even came with a certificate of authenticity proving that I had a limited edition exclusive mouse pad. Now, if this does sound interesting to you and you want to grab one for yourself, use the link in the description below, and you can also use code DOTS to save 15% off your entire order. So without further ado though, let's get back into the video. Now, for those who do not know, New World is a theme park styled MMORPG with a maximum level of 60, set in the mid 17th century land of Eternum. There are 3 factions in the game: the Syndicate, the Marauders, and the Covenant, which you choose at level 10 and can change after a cooldown period. However, these factions do only affect your PvP activities and do not affect your ability to party up for quests and dungeons. The game has action combat with a feel similar to Dark Souls, with your actions having a ton of weight to them. This leads to a more tactical and deliberate style of combat, as opposed to the higher APM style that we traditionally do associate with action combat. The game does have no classes, with your character's skills and passives being determined by the weapons you choose, which you can use 2 of at a time, as well as your armor weight of choice. Do note, though, that these can be changed at any time, which I do think is very nice. Each weapon has 1 or 2 stats that it scales with, so you'll be able to mix and match a ton of different weapon types, giving you a lot of build variety. The game also has a very heavy focus on crafting, with a trade skill style similar to that of old school RuneScape. There is a ton of depth to the crafting system in the game, giving people who love crafting a lot that they're able to do. New World also does have endgame dungeons that you can run with parties of 5, and at the moment the game has 6 dungeons, which are called expeditions, and they will be looking to add more over time. Raids, I believe, are slated to come into the game at some point as well, but at the moment we currently do not have any present. The game also does have the Holy Trinity, with your character playing as a tank, a healer, or a DPS, but with New World's weapon style combat, you can easily view these roles as a spectrum, with your character able to hybridize between the different roles. On the PvP side of things, the game does have a bunch to offer as well. They have an Outpost Rush mode, which is a level 60 only battleground PvPvE game mode. You're also able to flag up for open world PvP, giving yourself a 10% experience boost and some extra luck out in the world, and you're also able to fight other flagged players. You also have the ability to duel other players, and there are certain open world PvP objectives called forts that if your faction holds, it will give your faction bonuses in the zone while the fort is held. One of the major PvP systems in New World, though, is the way that territories work. Factions and the guilds within the factions fight to hold territories by doing PvP quests in the zone to gain influence for their faction. Once a faction gains enough influence, they're able to pay a gold fee and declare war on a guild and faction that currently controls the main settlement in the zone. Once war is declared, the attacking side and the defending side pick 50 players each to fight in a war, with the goal of the war for the attackers to be able to capture points around and within the fort, while the defenders want to prevent the attackers from doing so for 30 minutes. The way that the 50 players are determined for the defensive side is by the guild that holds the town, and on the offensive side, the guild that will select the 50 players is picked by a lottery from all guilds who declared war and volunteered to lead. By owning a territory, you give your faction tons of bonuses within the territory, such as the ability to access their bank in other territories owned by the faction, and more. Taxes to use certain systems such as crafting tables, auction house, and more are determined by the company or the guild that owns the town, which they can then use to upgrade the town to get other bonuses. Town upgrades can give faction members buffs, improve the crafting tables, and make the settlement harder to take during wartime, and more. I could go way more in depth into this system, but since this is just a review video, I just wanted to give you guys an abridged version just so you have a rough idea of how it works. What is cool though with the territories too is that as you do more and level through them, you'll unlock certain perks for the zones, such as increased gathering speed, storage, etc. Sometimes towns can also be invaded by NPCs, and the 50 defenders will then instead need to defend against hordes of NPC enemies, otherwise certain upgrades that you've done in your settlement will degrade. Wars and invasions do have set times, so you will know ahead of time when these will occur. The game also does have player housing, a transmog-like system, not exactly what you would expect from an outfit system, but there is some semblance of one, the ability to repair and salvage gear right from your inventory, and more. The game does have a microtransaction shop, but thankfully at the moment, most things in the shop are cosmetic. There have been some concerns about a potential cash shop items that will be added later on, which was a huge fiasco during the beta, with Amazon adding some heavy pay-to-convenience items, but only time will tell if those will return or remain out of the game. Now, with the about section out of the way, guys, I want to get into my good, the gray, and the bad. We're going to kick things off with the good. And the first two things that I have are graphics and audio. The game looks and sounds fantastic. The art team at Amazon, I feel like as with most MMOs, absolutely carried things and is doing, it did such a great job with designing the game. When I first started playing New World, you know, there's nothing better than that first step into a new MMO and that new feeling when you're that new adventure and you don't know what's going on and just you get to look at the world around you. And one of the great things with New World is that because the graphics and the audio in the game are so fantastic, you feel immersed right away, or at least I did. The colors are very vibrant. The graphics look great. The audio cues in this game are top-notch. You notice right away that the game looks and sounds very good. Speaking of which, the animations in the game are also something that I love personally for New World, because one of the things that I do feel in the animation front of things is that New World has so many small touches that when you combine it with the good graphics and audio, again, you feel very immersed. Just a lot of little things, like with the way that certain items interact with each other, certain collisions interact, the way that your character's animations will change slightly based off of the way you're running or climbing, or the way that the audio from your character talking will have like different effects to it based off of what helmet you're wearing. Like, there's just so many small touches to these three things that, again, the game does feel very immersive. Now, another game, or another pro that I do have is the combat. The combat was something that going into New World, I personally thought I was going to hate, because I feel like when you watch people play, or at least this is how I felt, when I watched people play New World, as never playing it myself, I thought it looked really slow. I thought the low cooldown count was going to feel terrible, and I just didn't think it looked fun. But when I actually started playing it, a lot of the weight and deliberateness and just the intentional nature of the combat didn't really show through as much watching it, but did feel it playing it. And so I actually really like the combat style. It's a bit different than the other action MMOs that are out there, and I actually think is a very good touch for the game. It personally is something that I do enjoy quite a lot. The next point that I have is going to be the crafting and the gathering. The crafting systems in this game are really similar to that of old school RuneScape, like I mentioned earlier, whose crafting and gathering systems I absolutely do enjoy. And it's just nice to have a crafting system in a game that, at least to me, feels like it is relatively easy to pick up but does not lack depth. A lot of the other MMOs that I've been trying recently, like they'll claim like, oh man, we have in-depth crafting, but a lot of companies I feel like will accidentally use the word in depth when they actually just mean complicated. Like complexity and depth are not the same thing. And so it's nice that New World's crafting and gathering, it feels approachable, like you can just kind of look at things and figure out what's going on, but there is enough depth to it that you really feel like you can get super into it. So they did do a great job with that. Now, the next point that I have is that towns do look fantastic. Now, unfortunately, a lot of towns clearly have been copy and pasted from certain areas. That is a unfortunate reality in the game. But at least me walking into my first town, the towns felt like I was in a single player game. I just really love the design. They look cool. Again, goes back to that point of immersion. You feel like you're in a 17th century town. They did a very good job with the town design overall. I do wish that they had more unique town designs, just more related to the different zones and like having like more of like a unique feel with those zones. And so it is unfortunate to see the copy and pasted towns, but the ones that you first encounter, I feel like as a new player, look great. And the next point that I have is going to be the payment model. It's just a buy to play game with a microtransaction shop for cosmetics. Does not really get much better than that. A lot of games, they have microtransaction shops, loot boxes, subscription, yearly expansions to buy. Like there's just so much, they just constantly demanding your money. But with New World, you buy the game and you're good to go. You can get microtransaction shop items if you want to, but there's no sub, no nothing, and there's something satisfying about being able to just play a game and like realize and like know that like, oh, I'm just not paying every month to play it. So I do enjoy the payment model of the game, and it is definitely a very consumer friendly model. I also do think that the classless model of New World is super cool. I love the concept behind only needing one character in the game. So like for example, if you're playing, let's say, Great Axe and Hatchet, and you're playing that weapon combination, and one of those weapons gets nerfed and you want to try something else, it's not like another game where you have to go and level up a new character and then get that character geared and level up all their skill line to do this and do that. But with New World, it's like, all right, I want to use 2 new weapons. Let me equip these 2 new weapons, and I'm ready to party. And so I really do like that aspect of New World. And I didn't think I would like the classes model. I've always loved classes in games, but it actually surprised me, and I liked it a lot more than I thought I would. Speaking of which, the character building in the game is extremely good. I'm always a big sucker for games with like good MMO character building, and New World, I think, does it very well between traits on your weapons, different armor weights, different weapon types, skill trees that you can customize, skills to choose, passives. There's consumables. There's a lot of character building that can be done, builds that can be made, and so obviously I did enjoy that aspect of New World quite a lot. Now, moving into some gray area points here, the first thing that I do have is the expeditions. So the early on expeditions in the game, I do think are a little boring and a little easy, to be honest. The difficulty does scale up pretty good when you get towards the end of the game, but at least in the beginning, the first couple I did felt really easy. Also, something I did not like about their dungeon system is that they have like an orb or a key system. Think like Mythic Plus, right? Where you have to have the key in order to do, like from World of Warcraft, you have to have the key in order to do a Mythic Plus dungeon. But imagine if there was no other option for dungeons besides the keys. Like that's all you can do is get a key, run a dungeon, and then you can't run another dungeon until you get another key. And from what I've been able to tell, keys are kind of a pain in the butt to craft, so I'm not really the biggest fan of that system for dungeons, because that's one of your only big sources of endgame PvE content, and you're locking people out of it behind a key system. I don't really like that personally. Something else that I wish that New World had was a manual group finder. They do have like a chat that you can use to, find people and stuff. But believe it or not, I can't believe I'm saying this. I actually wish that they had a manual group finder, kind of like WoW did. I do feel like for New World, a system like that would actually work really well and find a good place in the game instead of having to, constantly type in the text chat that you're looking for people. It would be easier to just be able to kind of list your group, list what you're looking for, what you're going to be doing, and then having people just apply to your group. So, not necessarily the worst thing that the game doesn't have, but I do think it would be a nice quality of life feature for the game to have. Now, guys, with the pros and the gray out of the way, let's get into the cons. You know, a lot of people, when they first start playing a game, they want to know what they should worry about, what to look out for, and we're going to cover all of that right now. So the first thing that I have is weapon swapping. Apparently, this is something that Amazon is going to be working on, but at the time of making this video, it is very bad. So I've played multiple MMOs with weapon swap mechanics, such as The Elder Scrolls Online and Guild Wars 2. And in those games, you know, I feel like the weapon swapping feels very similar between the two games. I press my weapon swap, I get my weapon swap. But with New World, there is a lot of weird delay and timing with your weapon swapping, and it feels extremely clunky. If you don't use your weapon swap at the correct time during an animation, and if you hit it too soon, your character just will not weapon swap. Sometimes the weapon swap animation feels like it takes 2-3 seconds to go off even after you click it. So you use your abilities, you're trying to swap weapons, and your character's just kind of like standing there doing nothing. It just feels extremely clunky, and for me, was one of the first things that I noticed with the combat is like, oh, this feels bad. Like, I noticed it very, very quickly. So something that desperately, in my opinion, needs to be improved. The next thing I think that needs to be worked on is the character creation. Character creation in New World is pretty limited, which I was extremely surprised by. They just don't have a lot of sliders. It's just kind of like you choose some presets and you can customize it a little bit, but I was super surprised to see a brand new MMO with limited character creation. It just kind of seemed like something that's pretty obvious that people are going to want some level of expanse with, because they want to customize their characters and make them look cool, you know? And so I think it was a huge misstep for them to kind of underdo character creation. Another thing that I don't like is no swimming. You can't swim in the game. Like, if you walk into water, your character just, like, walks on the floor like Pirates of the Caribbean and just drowns. And I find it kind of ironic because, you know, you're playing... It's a stereotypical starting quest, right? You're a sailor on a boat, and your boat crashes, and you wash up on an island. But, like, if my guy can't swim, what am I doing out in the water? Like, take some swimming lessons first, you know? So, I don't like that. Find it a little weird. Think it's, you know, I don't know. It's just a weird touch to not have to me. Now, with the way that New World server structures are designed, it can lead to dead servers. So they have a lot of servers in the game with, I believe at the moment, still a population cap on the server of 2,000. Now, the problem with that is that if people on your server start to quit or leave the game, your server will just be dead, and so for you, New World will feel dead. And because there really is not any cross-server, cross-realm tech, you're just stuck on dead servers with nothing to do. Also, with the way that the war system works, like I described earlier in the About section, there are times that you could literally just have one faction take over your entire server, and because inventory management, which I'm going to get to in a second, is tied so heavily to, you know, your faction owning a town, it feels like just managing your bank and your inventory is an absolute nightmare. And speaking of which, inventory management in this game is trash. It's so bad. So you have items stored in different locations and the storage is based off of weight, not based off of item slots. Excuse me. It's based off of weight, not item slots. And the problem is like certain materials just feel like they weigh so much and other things just weigh nothing. But the problem is like, okay, well, I have stuff stored in town A and I've ran out of storage there, so now I need to go store stuff in town B. The problem is that if you end up losing town B, now you can't move any of your stuff between the two towns, and because the fast travel in the game is also something I'm going to talk about that's kind of limited, and it is also the amount of currency that you need to fast travel is based off of your character weight. Trying to move shit between town A and town B is very, very bad. So the bank management, the inventory management in the game is not good. I also believe, and I don't know if this has changed, so you can correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, they did make it at one point so that you can't list items on the auction house if your bank is full in that town, which to me is bass-ackwards, because there would be no other time. Like, that's like a primo time to sell shit, is I have too much shit, so let me sell it. And New World's just like, nah, you can't do that. And I don't know. To me, it's just so weird, because it's just kind of like, you just scratch your head and you're like, why? That just seems like an obvious thing that I'd be able to do. So I don't like that. The inventory management in the game is very bad. Now, personally, I found the questing and story in New World, the leveling process, to be one of the worst I've played in a long time. The questing is really fun for the first 20 to 30 levels, but very quickly you realize like, oh, I'm just going to be doing this the whole time. And basically what I mean by that is quests in New Worlds are either go kill shit, go loot stuff, or kill mobs to loot stuff. Like the quests are all the same. Like there's just no variety. It's the same quest all the time. Or go skin this mob. Like there's just you do like the same like 3 to 5 quests essentially for 60 levels. There's no variety at all. It's just like, okay, what zone am I in doing it? Like, and it's so obvious to me that the leveling process was just added in later on, because again, if you don't know, New World was originally slated to be this like PvP survival game, and it turned into like a theme park MMO later on. It is just so obvious to me that the questing process was not fully fleshed out, and it is extremely boring. Now, one of the things that is nice, though, is that throughout the leveling process, you do have some story quests that you can do. But the problem is that, again, very similarly to the questing, it's so obvious that they didn't really flesh it out all that much that the story quests are just not... it just feels like another quest to do. Like, there's not a lot of cutscenes that make you feel invested in what's going on. There isn't enough dialogue to make you feel invested in what's going on. Like... as far as I could tell, you don't even really get a complete lore picture from just simply doing the story quests. Like, I was looking on Reddit to even be like, what is the story of New World? So I've done most of the story, and I still don't even know what's happening. And I saw some guy write this, like, big, long post about it, and he was like, yeah, I was able to figure this out from the story, and then all these books, and then this, and then that, like, that he found in the game. And I guess that's kind of cool if you like the exploration aspect of, you know, feeling like, okay, I got to figure out what's going on. But at the same time, I feel like for the story of a game, you should be able to get an idea of what's happening through that main quest, which most players are going to be going through. I don't think most players are going to be reading every book that they come across in the world. And so, to me, the story just wasn't fully fleshed out or well done. It doesn't feel like there's like a big bad guy that I'm supposed to be fighting, when apparently there is, but through doing the story, it's not apparent to me that that is the case. And so I really think that the story just needs a lot of work. But also, other games like Elyon, I think, did the questing pretty well, where you had like kind of like some, you know, boring quests in between doing the story quests, but it was just really well paced. I just feel like with the questing in New World, the pacing between doing the boring quests and then doing a story quests, it's so heavily skewed in the boring quest part. And so I just don't like the leveling process personally. And unfortunately, I also find the end game to be very grindy and repetitive. You know, the way that you pretty much kind of gear when you get to the end of the game in New World is to just kind of like kill boss mobs over and over again and loot chests from them and get gear through high watermark. If you played Star Wars: The Old Republic, it's really similar to the fact where, you know, you get your gear to a certain point and then your eye level goes up, and then you can get that eye level gear, and then when you get that eye level gear, it goes up. So you just progressively kind of climb this ladder. But the problem is that you just do the same thing over and over again to climb that ladder. So again, it feels very repetitive. Now, I know New World is adding in some sort of like expertise system where you can essentially like grind up that number through doing various activities and not just doing the mob killing at the end of the day. But still, like, I still personally don't like that style of gearing. It's just not really for me, and especially with New World, like I explained earlier, getting into dungeons is kind of a pain. Outpost Rush, it can only be active maybe at certain times of the day depending on the population of your server, and so it's like you do kind of feel like you are funneled into really heavily doing this end game grinding of mobs, because a lot of the game zones are focused around it. So I personally am not a fan of the end game, to be honest, either. You know, the PvP and stuff, it is fun and enjoyable, but a lot of the stuff that you have to do to get there, not necessarily the biggest fan of. Now, there also are some certain quality of life things just missing from New World, such as sharing quests, not being able to expect players, no raid partying, just some things that I feel like should be obvious for the game to have that it doesn't. Also, new players start in random locations on the map, which I find kind of weird. So if you and your boys are trying to power up some New World and play, you guys all might start in different spots on the map, which I think is kind of dumb. You know, I think you should be able to pick, you know, through a list of zones that are possible to spawn in, you should pick so that groups of friends can start in the same location. Also, Another issue in New World that I have is map movement. They're slowly improving this by now adding movement speed on roads, but I do think that the amount of movement speed they added is too low. I think it needs to be higher, but fast traveling around New World can be kind of a pain. You need to use a currency called Azoth to travel around the world, but it is capped at 1,000, at least at the time of recording this, and unfortunately, like, you use Azoth to do a lot of things and like do a lot of other things, but the thing with the Azoth is that, at least that I have found through the leveling process, is that you either feel like you have so much that you have nothing to do with it, and so you just keep losing potential Azoth because it's trying to go past the cap but can't, or because you haven't done a story quest in a while, you're just starved for movement, and you know, maybe you have a bag full of stuff and you want to travel somewhere, and a fast travel would cost you such a huge portion of your Azoth so you don't want to, and then you're forced to just walk there, and the movement in the game around the map just doesn't feel very good. Also, the spawn rates for mobs feel backwards versus bosses. Certain mobs spawn way too fast, and bosses will spawn way too slow. And this also has an issue with certain quest NPCs not being usable by more than one person. So, like, for example, there's a quest early on where you have to skin a bear. Now, the problem is that if 8 people attack the bear and kill the bear, only one person can actually skin the damn thing. So the next 7 people in line have to sit there and wait at the boss spawns, which could take anywhere from, you know, 7 to 10 minutes, depending on the boss, and then try again. And then, again, only one more person can skin it. So just certain things about the game, just, again, they just feel weird, you know? Also, there's no guild bank. Find that a little odd, being that this game has such a huge focus on guild-based PvP, you know? So that I do find a little bit strange. There's also a, you know, and again, if you've kept up with New World in any capacity, you will know there's a ton of bugs with the game. There have been a ton of cheats over the course of the game, and the game feels, it just, with all, I won't get too much into all the duping and the bugs and get into specific things. I'm just going to get into my one of my final points here. The game feels unfinished, and I'm sure you can tell from just the list of cons that I've said here. It just felt like to me that Amazon did not know what they wanted their game to be, and this was a concern that I had prior to the game's release, where they pivoted their direction so many times and changed what they wanted New World to be, that it just feels like this patchwork game of all of the previous iterations of the game, and it doesn't feel like it ran in any one direction very well. And it just, the game, to me, as somebody who didn't play any of the betas and only played when the game launched, the game just does not feel finished. It feels extremely unpolished, and there's just a lot of stuff missing, and a lot of stuff that kind of leaves you scratching your head wondering, like, why did you guys do it this way, you know? And it just felt like Amazon, to me, they just lack a bit of experience with game dev. I know that they've, even throughout patches of New World, there have been so many undocumented changes that they haven't put in patch notes that people have found, and then it made them really annoyed and upset, rightfully so. And I don't know. It's just, while New World released and had a lot of potential, it's extremely evident that playing the game is the most fun within the first 30 levels. I know for the first 30 levels, I was hyped, the game was new, it was fun, and I was having an amazing time. But, like, due to all of the cons I just mentioned, and I just burnt out really hard, really fast. I know I actually still even hadn't made it to max level yet, because I just got so bored of the leveling process that I couldn't even get the rest of the way there. And at the moment, you know, is this game worth playing? I'm sure it's pretty obvious by the way I've been talking about it. I personally don't think New World right now is worth getting into as a new player. While the game does have a lot of great things about it, the bad makes it a little bit hard for me to enjoy. And the game, like most games I feel like that have released recently, did not feel like it was ready to launch, between the amount of bugs, cheats, and just simply the fact that it does not feel like that Amazon spent enough time developing a theme park MMO, and it feels like this Frankenstein game of its past versions. Like I said, this was something I was extremely concerned about post-launch, and it's something that I thought was going to hurt the game, and it turned out that I was correct. Now, maybe New Worlds will get better and improve over the course of 2022, but at least going into the new year, going into 2022, I do think there are much better options for your time out there. But guys, that is going to be it for me today with my New World Is It Worth Playing video. What do you guys think about New World? Do you enjoy it? Do you guys maybe disagree with my opinion? Do you find the game fun? Or do you agree? And do you feel like this isn't the best time to hop into New Worlds for new players? Let me know in that comment section below. And if you guys did like this review video, I would appreciate if you left a like on it. It helps support me in that YouTube algorithm. And guys, for more MMO reviews and is it worth playing videos and first impression gameplay, please feel free to hit that sub button as well as hit the bell to keep those notifications on. So thank you all so much for stopping by. I do very much appreciate it. As always, I'm Dots Gaming, and I'll see you all in the next video.